Hey guys, so in today's video, I want to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is budgeting. And specifically, I want to explain the reasons why your budget may not actually be helping you to save more money. And the reason why I wanted to do this topic is because I find that with many of my clients, they do have a budget because, you know, they've been told, oh, you need a budget, you need to budget your money. But then I find that they still struggle to save money. And so you almost have to ask, is there a point in budgeting in the first place? But what I found is that there are probably some mistakes that you're making with your budget that is stopping you from saving more money. And so what I want to do in this video is uncover that, so hopefully you can start using your budget to actually help you save more. Okay, so let's talk about reason number one when it comes to your budget not actually helping you to save more money. And the first reason is because you keep changing your budgeting method, thinking that that is the main problem. Now, when I'm talking about a budgeting method, if you literally type on YouTube different types of budgets, even on my YouTube channel, I have shared that there are so many different budgeting methods you could do. You could decide to use full-on cash, and that's called the cash envelope system. Or you could decide to put everything on a spreadsheet and literally give every penny or cent a name. Or you could even decide to automate everything so that you can set as many standing orders and direct debits as possible so that you can actually spend the rest of the money without thinking about it. There are so many different ways to budget, but I think what tends to happen is that we almost get analysis paralysis and we get very overwhelmed thinking about what budgeting method we should use. Should we use a spreadsheet? Should we be using cash? Should we be automating everything? When in reality, that part isn't necessarily the problem, because as much as it's nice to have the perfect budget, how you behave with the budget will dictate whether you end up saving money or not. And what I mean by this is, if you're the type of person to be trying to think about which budgeting method you should use and you're all of a sudden getting analysis paralysis, the first thing that might happen is that you don't end up using any budget at all, and so you're still back to level zero. Or the other thing is that because you're so focused on trying to figure what budgeting method you could use, you haven't actually understood that the problem may not be the budgeting method. The problem could be the way you act when you actually do the budget. So let's say that you decide to focus all of your time thinking about your budgeting spreadsheet and whether all the formulas add up and whether it looks, you know, pretty and everything, which obviously there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're so focused on that part, what you might find is that the budget will look all nice and you'll have all your numbers there, but by the end of the month, the question is, have you actually stuck to that budget? Did that budget actually help you to save money? And if you find that it didn't and that you're still at the same level as you were 2 months ago, well, then it's because you have been focusing on the wrong thing. So rather than focusing on the actual budgeting method, you need to be focusing on your behaviors when it comes to actually sticking to your budget. And that's then going to help you to actually save more money. And this is something that I always harp on my clients with, because I honestly could not care less what budgeting method you can use. I've had clients experiment with cash. I've had clients who prefer spreadsheets. Whatever it is, I always tell them to just make a decision, because you can always adapt from there. After a couple of months, you may find that actually you don't really like the spreadsheet and maybe you want to try cash. That's fine. But as long as you just make that quick decision, you can then focus on the real problem, which will be your behaviors when it comes to the actual budgeting process and the way you spend your money throughout the month. And if you're someone who maybe resonates with that and maybe you want a bit more support when it comes to saving money, I will leave a link in the description below for you to find out more about one-on-one coaching. But essentially, when it comes to the budgeting method, I would say just pick one. Pick one, go with the flow, see how you like it, because you can always change, but make sure you're not dwelling on that too much, because most likely it is not the actual problem. And if you're liking this video so far, then feel free to give me a thumbs up, as it really does help to support the channel, plus it's free. Okay, so the second reason why your budget may not actually be helping you to save more money is because you may be using your budget to restrict you rather than benefit you. So what do I mean by this? Let me be clear. I don't care what anyone says. A budget does not equal no spending. Okay, let me repeat that. A budget does not equal no spending. If you decide that you're going to completely cut out your spending, that is not the decision of the budget. That is because you made that decision. Because I want to be clear, because every time I hear that, oh, I feel like a budget is restricting, I always say that the reason why the budget is restricting is because you have decided to restrict yourself from your spending. Your budget is neutral. Your budget does not do anything. All your budget does is just show you your income and your expenses. You then decide how much you want to save versus how much you want to spend, and you put that into the budget. So if you are the type of person that will do your budget, but you will say that I'm not going to go out, I'm not going to spend money on this, I'm not going to spend money on that, but then after that you feel miserable and you tell yourself, oh, I feel restricted, the problem is because you decided to restrict yourself. But what most of us do is that we will go and blame the budget, when really and truly we should actually be blaming ourselves. And I'm not trying to sound harsh, but the reason why I want to emphasize this point is because I have just heard so many things where people are saying that, you know, I don't budget because it's too restricting. I don't want to do a budget because it will stop me from spending money. The truth is, you are the person who decides where your money is going to go. A budget is simply a plan to help you lay out where you want your money to go, so you can understand, this is how much I want to save and this is how much I want to spend. So we really need to be careful when we feel like the budget is restricting us. You have to ask yourself, why is my budget restricting me? Is it because I have made the decision to restrict myself, and why have I done that? Is it because I feel really guilty when I spend my money? Is it because I've been told that I should be saving all my money? If you continuously have those types of thoughts, you will then put that in your budget, and that will be the reason why actually you stop saving, because you'll then feel so restricted. And if you feel so restricted, you'll probably end up doing the opposite and actually spend more money than you intended to. So it's really important to ask yourself how you can create a balance. I have never ever told people that they should completely stop their spending. What I have always said is you just want to be able to plan out that spending so that you know exactly how much you want to spend versus how much you want to save. But there is no either or. You always have to ask yourself, how can I do both? And how is a budget going to help me to do both? Okay, so the next reason as to why your budget may not be helping you to save more money is because you may only be tracking your expenses rather than setting a budget. Now, when I'm talking about tracking your expenses, what I mean is, yes, you may look at your bank statements and see how you did when it came to your spending. So you may be figuring out how much you spent on groceries, on toiletries, on going out to eat, and all of that stuff, which is great. But sometimes I think we forget that tracking your expenses doesn't necessarily mean that you're setting a budget. When you are tracking your expenses, you are just looking at how you spent your money. But when you are doing a budget, you are actually telling your money where to go. So you are deciding what you're going to do with the money before you actually spend the money. So these are actually two different processes, and many people think that if they track their expenses, then they've set a budget, when honestly all you've done is just tracked your expenses. And it's not to say that tracking your expenses is bad. I actually think it's quite useful, but it's so important to distinguish the two, because if you're just tracking your expenses but you're not actually setting the budget, well, how are you going to set the amount that you want to save if you've not actually told your money where to go? So it's really important to actually set your budget, tell your money where to go, decide how much you want to save versus how much you want to spend. But also, if you do want to track your expenses, make sure that you are actually having a look and evaluating it. I see so many people just tracking their expenses and then they do nothing. And it's like, well, what was the point in tracking your expenses in the first place? That's just wasting time, honestly. So what I typically do is I will set my budget at the beginning of the month, and I have so many videos where I actually talk through, you know, how I've actually set up my budget and giving you real numbers. So I'll definitely link some in the description below for you. But what I will do is I will set my budget at the beginning of the month. Then at the end of the month, I will track my expenses and I will have a look and see how did I do after I set that budget, and actually evaluate to see whether I need to make any changes in my next budget. So for example, let's say that I budgeted 200 for groceries at the beginning of the month, but by the end of the month I've actually spent like 300. Well, in my next budget, I may then decide to actually increase that to maybe 275 or even 300 to make sure that I stick to that same budget the next month, because I want to be much more realistic and I want to use my previous spending to help guide me when I'm thinking about my future spending. So if you're tracking your expenses, that's great, but if you're not matching that with actually setting the budget, you may find that you haven't been able to save money because you haven't dictated where that money should go in the first place. And if you have set a budget and you track your expenses, but you don't really do anything when you do track your expenses, well then I'm not gonna lie, you're probably wasting time, because when you track your expenses, you should be using that as guidance for your next budget. So you can see that actually if I'm spending a bit more money, you can then put that in your budget next time, so that you understand again how much you're spending versus how much you'll be able to save. Now, if you realize that you're someone who has maybe tried to budget in the past, but you haven't been able to stick to it, and it's actually stopped you from being able to save money or even have money to start investing, and maybe you need a bit more support with that, then definitely check out my one-on-one coaching, because what I've been able to do is help so many clients create a budget that not only works for them, but they are able to still save so much more money whilst being able to spend that money with no restrictions and stick to their budget easily too. So make sure you check that out if you haven't already. What you can do is book a free call just to find out more about working with me. So I'll link more information up here for you and in the description below. But when it comes to using your budget to save more money, all I would say is that you can have fun with your budget, you can enjoy it, and it can be a very simple process, and actually having that budget can help you to save so much more money. And I'm talking from personal experience because I'm someone who used to spend my whole paycheck, but when I actually started using a budget, and I started using a budget that works really well for me, I went from literally saving 0% of my income to actually saving over 40% of my income consistently. And that was simply because I had a budget that really worked well for me, and I was still able to enjoy my money. I was still able to spend my money as well. So don't always think that the budget is there to hurt you or to restrict you. The budget can actually help you to not only save more money, but it can also help you to enjoy your spending too. So if you did like this video, then please do give me a thumbs up if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments, do you like the idea of budgeting? Is it something that you think will help you or hurt you? I do post every Tuesday, so if you would like to know more, then of course you can subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys next week.